So welcome to, let me read the title because it's so clever. Make a Move, Motion Graphics and After Effects for Beginners. Today we are going to take a look at After Effects from the very start, scratch, nada, nothing, somebody who's never touched this stuff. And if you've played around with it a little, that's fine. You'll still learn a few things today. But the outline for the course is generally I want to kind of teach you concepts, tools, and principles of motion graphics that you can then take into your own projects, into your own social media posts, into video work you're doing. But I want to hopefully just kind of lay more of like stuff for your tool belts that you can then take and apply elsewhere. Course-wise, today we're going to hopefully get through the basic tools that we'll use for the most part and how to manipulate those tools and start creating motion, and get a little bit into concepts of animation. And I say that because when you get into After Effects, you can get to know After Effects as a program to do stuff and move this from point A to point B. But to become a motion graphics designer, it's all about how it gets from point A to point B. And that's kind of where you start going up levels and going like, oh, I see. Because you'll see within the first few minutes of class, we'll be able to take a shape and move it across the screen. Like, that's not a big deal. It's all about more in the execution and how it gets across the screen, even in the same amount of time, but maybe in a different kind of rhythm or speed or path. So all those things are to take into account in the fact that After Effects is such a huge program. Like, you can do so much with it. You know, there isn't a Hollywood movie or TV show out there that isn't touched by After Effects, because it's used for so many things beyond just motion graphics. And we might touch on some things here and there, kind of video effects world-wise, but mostly I want to stick to motion graphics because I think that is a good place to learn all of those basic principles that you can then carry over into anything else you want to do with the program. So, excuse me, let me take my gum out. I hate talking with gum. Before we get started, I just want to know if there's any general questions or anything like you're wanting to do in this class, like something like, oh, I always wanted to do that. Because there is 3 weeks that we get to look into things, and I'd love to take suggestions and be like, oh, somebody wanted to know how to do that. I could probably like give you 10 or 15 minute like mini lessons on stuff that you actually want to do. Does anybody have thoughts? It might come to you too as we kind of carry on. Well, that's good. I think this is what can help set you apart from other motion graphic people out there, is taking a look at not just what's under the hood of each of these tools, but the principle behind it all. And I just keep saying it over and over, but we'll just dive in and kind of start seeing what I'm getting to. So for starters, I wanted to just show a sample video, and some of you may have seen this. We use this for our kind of social media campaign. So is that looping? I think it's looping. So there's a very basic text-based motion graphics. So we have some words that are coming up, flying in from the sides, flying in from the bottom. Then as a group, they all go away and make room for a logo. And then as we kind of stop looping it so you don't have any seizures. If you ever get a chance to kind of download some of your favorite motion graphics things, the best thing ever is getting to scrub through it and actually see what's happening on a frame-by-frame basis. So we have some words coming in from the left side, the right side, the bottom. and then it moves out of the way, and here comes the logo, and you see these dates and times swoop in with kind of this rotation entrance, and then a website. So, I mean, that's pretty basic stuff. And I want to point out just kind of how basic and simple that is, and that you could do this in After Effects, and I could teach you what you need to know in 10 minutes or less, and you could be out here and say, hey, I can do like texty based kind of motion graphic stuff. But I want to show it to you now in comparison to this one. Go back. So this has a little bit more to it. These little kind of flares are what are called secondary animations, and they're very simple in concept and execution, but they can kind of make all the difference in making a little animated thing just kind of stand out just a little bit more. Like, oh, wait a minute. So if we scrub through this one, you know, it's the same words coming in, but now that O kind of echoes out, gives us the kind of like a little firework effect. As these words come in, they have this flash of line behind them. For beginners, gets its own thing, you know. And then this is probably the most complex part of it, and it's not too hard to do at all. Again, we'll hopefully get there by the end of today. Is it's just these line paths that come out of the logo, and then the last two lines swoop down and reveal a website. And so that's kind of like step 2. I would say, like, oh, you're able to move stuff around. Now you're able to add little secondary animation flares, which helps you stand out. But I still think there's one step missing in as far as animation concepts goes, and that's what we want to eventually, by the end of the course, get to. So if there's any way I can break down the 3 weeks of this class, is that by today, I want you to be able to do this kind of stuff. Maybe by the second session, maybe by today, you get to do little secondary animation kind of things. And then by the end of the 3rd week, you're able to do this, which will just feel animated, feel like a cartoon. So there's just a little more going on with bounciness and kind of like a, you know, everything's got flashes and kind of motion blur to it, and I can scrub through this again, but those are the kinds of things that I think ultimately what makes a motion designer realize I'm not just somebody who knows After Effects, I'm an animator. I'm somebody who thinks that these words are alive and they kind of stretch and move. Like the word move there is taller because it's moving faster. Like if you just think about cartoons, you know, like something zooms across the screen, it stretches out. And when it lands, it bounces a little, like boing, and kind of like has this little, they should all like have this, feel like they're reacting to gravity. And then like as a whole, they all like kind of lean down and jump out of the screen. Same thing with the logo, so that flies up. It's tall, it's stretched, it's got motion blur, and then it bounces when it lands. And as the time comes in, bang, it like makes it kind of have this little like another burst that kind of motivates those lines coming out of it. And then they can kind of come around and do that thing. So if that's kind of a 3-step kind of way to look at animation is, you know, basic A to B stuff, and then secondary animations to give you a little flair, and then to actually apply animation principles on top of it all. I think those 3 parts will kind of encompass the next 3 weeks for us, and hopefully you all survive and get that far. But today I just want to get into the program and start playing around, and I think by the end of however much time we have left, we'll kind of see how far we get, and that will help kind of determine what routes we take in the weeks 2 and 3. So go ahead and let's go ahead and launch After Effects. And one thing I do like about After Effects is you don't need anything at all. You can build stuff within it and just do shapes and lines and everything all within it. And if you want to bring in artwork eventually later, you can, and we will in later sessions. But that's kind of part of the fun of it, is like you can just kind of have this blank canvas and be like, I want to draw a square. What do I want to do with that square? You know, and just start messing around with it. So without further ado, here is After Effects. Hey, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you're passionate about?
Sure.
Just kidding.
Learning After Effects. I don't make the favorite, you guys all know me, etc.
No, thank you for humoring me. So here's After Effects. If you have a splash screen, maybe you have it opens to a project, maybe you were already messing around and it just opens to there. Today, let's just open a new project. So go ahead and hit New Project. And here is our often overwhelming Adobe panel-based software. Stuff is kind of all over the place, and you'll start to get the hang of stuff that you use and stuff that you don't use. All these panels are kind of little tabs that you can drag and replace. Thank you. So as you get to know the program a little more, maybe you like your effects always open, so you leave that panel there. But in general, you'll start with the project is over here, and all of your files will start to come into here. We don't have any files yet. We're going to start creating some. This main big bar down here in the middle, that's going to separate your main timeline, which is going to be down here, and all of your layers. And then these are other panels if you want. I'll just close them for now. Up at the top, like other Adobe programs, if any of you have used Premiere or Photoshop, Illustrator, stuff like that, there's always different workspaces, and that's kind of always across the top. What kind of a workspace do you want to work in? They're standard. You can kind of get your own setup and then save it and then be happy that you can, hey, let's do the Justin workspace look. Across the top are our main tools, and you can just hover over these to see what they are. We'll use the selection tool a lot. The hand tool, there's zooming, rotation, camera we won't use. This one we will. It's an anchor point tool. This is our basic shape tool. It's rectangle now. You can switch it to other shapes. The pen tool, if anybody's familiar with the pen tool, it's kind of a nightmare, but it's also can be your best friend. The type tool. Brushing, cloning, erasing, that's kind of some Photoshop style work that you can do in here. And then a roto brush tool and a puppet tool. So a lot of stuff up there you could do. I'd say today we end up using 1, 2, maybe like 4 of these tools, and hopefully you'll feel comfortable with those 4 by the end. Let's just go ahead and start a new project. Well, that's what we did. We can start a new composition. Okay, so that's kind of the next step. Is right now we have a blank. There's nothing here to play with. There's not even layers or anything to put files in right now. You need to start what's called a composition in order to start building a project. So you can add a new composition, literally up at the top, composition, new composition. You can also use the new composition button is this little film strip with this blue, green, and red shape in the middle of it. That also creates a new composition for you. And so this brings up your composition settings. A little sun in here. Composition settings. Let's just walk through these. Some of you are familiar with video settings in Premiere. Very similar in After Effects that you're going to want to pay attention to, or just ignore completely because we're just playing around. We'll stay with basic. Don't even worry about advanced stuff right now. Right now the preset is HD 1080 24. I'm fine with that. I'm a film guy. I like things at 24 frames a second. I think stuff for the web is more 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. To me, that's just more frames to have to animate. So I like it at 24, and it looks still good to me. You might get your own preferences. So that 1080-24 is talking about how many pixels wide and high the composition is. And the composition is your canvas. So there's a decision to make at this point. If you're making stuff for the web, you might be doing things in different aspect ratios, different canvas size. For instance, Instagram, generally, they do let you do more widescreen stuff now, but Instagram is traditionally a square format. So if you were doing something that was supposed to end up on Instagram and you wanted to make this a square, you could go ahead and turn it into a square yourself just by making the width the same as the height. That would create a square composition to build from. That's where you would do that, because your composition, you'll always go in your composition and you can change the settings after the fact. If, like, say you made a widescreen kind of regular thing, but you wanted to make it square for Instagram, you can always go back in your composition and change that here as well. We'll just keep going down here. Pixel aspect ratio, always stay square pixels. This is kind of like an old-timey thing back when, like, the TV and the VCRs and stuff would stretch things different ways, and, like, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff now. A square pixel means 1 pixel on a computer screen is going to be the same as 1 pixel anywhere in the world. It's all square everywhere. It's not stretched out in some percentage format thing that you don't have to worry about. So always keep that square. And again, frame rate, as I said, I like 24 frames per second. I know a lot of stuff out there shoots at 30 or 60. That's very high frame rate. Just know that, like, that's adding more frames for you to be responsible for in your animation. You can still have something take a second to get from here to here. It's just going to take 60 frames to get there instead of 24. And that is the difference between, some of you guys are video gamers out there. You know what a video game feels like at 60 frames and 30 frames, because it's just kind of this smoothness factor of the animation. So the more frames you have, the smoother and more lifelike animation becomes. Maybe just keep that in mind. If you end up doing something where, like, I really want to make this animation like super slick, lifelike, you might want to go with 60 frames. And just 2.5 times your work for you, but that's fine. 24 is good though. Let's stay with 24. I like dividing by 12 and 6 and 8 and all those other numbers. It's fun. Okay, the next one here is resolution. That is also something you can change later. This is just going to be for playback, how high of a quality it's going to play back for you. I keep it at half because my little tiny laptop screen is only going to play it at half the size anyways, so I might as well just play it at half quality, and that actually looks like full quality at half size. And then the last options here, start time code and duration. So don't worry about time code. I mean, generally in the industry, everything starts at 1 hour. We don't have to worry about that now. Somebody's calling me. Yes. Yeah, and we'll show you how to do that. The duration, and this is the last thing, when you sit down, like, if you were wanting to say, like, you're doing a 30-second spot, this is where you put in 30 seconds. If you're like, I just want to do a 5-second Instagram thing that loops, change it to 5 seconds here. And that will, like, just keep you in those bounds of, like, hey, I know that this is the end, and this is how many frames I have to exactly end up at that 5 minutes. And that way you'll use every single frame. And that's something I'll keep talking about here, is kind of this idea that it's your responsibility for what every single frame of your animation looks like. You can add some animation and make a block move from here to here, and it's up to you to decide if between the start and the finish, if that's okay and acceptable or not. So it's just kind of this idea that you're babysitting. You're always watching. You'll watch your clip over and over 1,000,000 times, and you always have to say, like, that frame's a little weird there. Why is that frame weird? And just start getting in that habit of, like, each frame is your responsibility, so just take care of it. And the longer you get, the longer your day is. The more you realize that animators spend so much time animating because it takes a very long time because you want to make every single frame perfect. And the last one, the background color. As I said, you can go back and change this later. If you just click on that black square, that will bring up your colors. You can change the background color there as well. I'm just going to keep it black. And I'm going to hit OK. Any questions? Setting up a new composition. Okay, so nothing is in there right now, but if you notice down here in our timeline area, we do have the composition has shown up here. And I'm going to go ahead and close my render queue. Close it. You can close. Doesn't want to close. Whatever, you can open as many compositions as you want. They'll just be underlined. You know, if I could just make a few more. You can just switch between compositions that way. What's going on with I'm on the hand. All right, don't become the hand. So, great. I can close the render queue now. So yeah, you can even like build out your animated sequence piece by piece. Like if for you creating a 30-second piece is overwhelming, just do it in different compositions and be like, hey, here's the first 5 seconds and here's the next 5 seconds. And later you can always bring compositions and put them inside other compositions. And so that's just, it ends up becoming a part of your workflow. Something we'll probably get to in the next couple sessions. The idea that like you can do so much work and have so many layers down there. Like you can look down here and there'll be 40 different things that you're lost. That's a good time to kind of, it's called Precompose. You would put it in its own composition and then just bring it into a new composition and let it live on its own. And if you still need to access those 50 layers, you can, but at least it's out of your hair with what you're actually just working on right now. So that's composition. Change background. If at any point you want to go back and change your composition settings, we're going to start getting into shortcuts here. I hope your brain is wired for remembering shortcuts. Control click is everything, right? Control click or right click if you do have a right button on your mouse. If you go to composition and right click or control click, that lets you get back to those composition settings. Very good. Okay, so right now there is nothing in this composition. I think we'd do good to start by building our first shape and just kind of taking it from there. There you go, come back. So now that the composition has been made, you should have a composition window. Right now it's just blank and it's black right there. And if you ever lose your windows, you can go back up to window and bring that stuff back. Compositions are down here. So there's my composition window. A word on composition window, because that's where you're going to actually literally draw stuff and create shapes and masks and kind of see how your animation plays. There are some playback controls that can be a little funky. It's a little different. It's not like Premiere all the time. But just along the bottom is going to be your options and kind of some tools for you there. And as always in Adobe, you can hover over and see what these things do for you. This one here I always adjust. It's this, right now it's 44%, but it's fit to the window. So that first option there, fit, that means you're going to look at your entire composition and it's going to fit it no matter how big the screen is. So if I squish that, it's squishing the composition just so it fits everything. That's one of my favorite settings, is fitting. Kind of go down through these. If you remember earlier when we were setting up our settings, we chose half as our resolution. You can change that here and view stuff at full resolution. Again, I'm going to keep it at half because my screen is even half, so it's fine to play it back at half with no problems. And a lot of other scary things that I don't want you to worry about right now. Let's just make a square. How about that? Okay, the square tool, rectangle tool is this one over here. It looks like one. The shortcut is Q. Let's go ahead and hit that. And when we come over into our composition, we can click and drag and make a square or a rectangle. Does anybody remember or know how to make an exact perfect square to keep proportions equal? Hold down Shift. That's great. So that's another shortcut for you. So as you draw your square, hold Shift, and that keeps all edges equal. That also works for circles. It will keep your circle perfectly a circle and not kind of make it a little warp shape. So, I mean, you can kind of draw as many of these just to kind of get the hang of the tool. That's pretty cool. What is that? It's like some 1983 computer game. So that's making shapes. And if you just kind of went nuts like I did there, and now we look down at our layers, we can see that we have created a ton of rectangles, and it's numbered them for us, and they're all whatever in this folder contents, right? If I close down contents, all those rectangles go away, and you can see that I'm actually still just in one layer. So a rectangle will create a shape layer, and from there you can create more shapes within that same layer. It's much like Photoshop or Illustrator stuff, only you're nesting things within a layer. So multiple things can go in a layer, and so that's always something to be aware of, because you're going to start affecting these layers and doing things and like resizing and moving those layers around, and that's going to move everything in that layer. So if you have 6 rectangles, it's going to do that same thing to all 6 of those rectangles. So maybe you don't want to do that, maybe you do. It's kind of up to you how you end up creating these things. Also, just want to say at any point, just tell me, hey Justin, my name's Justin. You can say, Justin, stop, what was that? Or I have a question, or that's not working for me. Happy to take our time through this. Right now we just made a bunch of blobs of rectangles. Hopefully it's not too hard. Yes?
Why was your field turned off already?
I'm sorry?
Why was your field in your rectangle turned off already? Or have
Yeah, that's a great question. That's an option, your fill. You can change your fill up here. I turn my fill off. You can cycle through fill. And I was going to get to that, but we can do it right now. So as you're drawing your rectangles, you've got what's called a fill and a stroke. The fill is the color within the rectangle, and a stroke is the color outside of the rectangle. It's going to be your outline of the rectangle. Right now, my stroke is 69 pixels. That's why it's so big and wonky and looks stupid. If I had a nice stroke, maybe I'll bring it down quite a bit more, maybe just a couple, and then make it purple. I like things that are purple. So that's part of why the last square I made had no fill, so the new square I made had no fill. Your tools will always remember what you just did and keep those same settings. To turn off your fill, there's you could do it down here in these layers, and that's just kind of like it's buried under like triangle folder, like I never like doing that. If you go up to fill and hold Alt and click through it, that will cycle through your fill options. And I just cycled through to the red, and that means no fill. So Alt click on the fill will change that. Alt click on the stroke will also do the same thing. You can get rid of your stroke. I know. But I want a purple, nice purple. rectangle, and another thing you may notice is that once you're in the rectangle tool, you will only be able to make rectangles. If you try to click that rectangle you just made, you're actually just going to create a new rectangle. So you always are having to go back and select the selection tool to move anything that you made. So the selection tool is great. It's kind of just like whatever you click on, you can move around. Look at all those rectangles. I'm just going to delete them. But that's something just to get the hang of. And the shortcut for the selection tool is V. So as an After Effects motion graphics master user, you're going to be using V like your entire day long, because you're always making something, hit V and move it around. Make something, hit V, move it around. And that's just kind of just to get in the habit of it. Because again, it's kind of stubborn. It's like you're on rectangle tool. All I know how to do is make rectangles. I can't move stuff around. If you want to move stuff around, go select it first. So just always keep that in mind. So I just deleted everything. You can do that too if you want. I just want one great looking purple square. So let me start from scratch. If you want to delete your stuff, again, just go to your selection tool. You can click and drag over all of it and hit delete, and it'll just poof, get rid of all of them. Let's make one rectangle, one perfect purple square. All right. I turned off the stroke because I don't want an outline. You can also take the pixels all the way to 0, and that will also have no stroke to it. Technically, it's a stroke, but it's 0, so you can't see it. Math. So back to the selection tool. I can now move around my rectangle and put it where I want it. How many of you are familiar with the concept of keyframing? 1, 2, 3-ish. Okay, maybe half, a little more. That is kind of the bane of any existence of any animation program. Is keyframes are everything, and they just compound your work and complicate matters, but they're absolutely necessary. To move things from A to B, you need a keyframe at A and a keyframe at B. Yes?
I'm not able to select the rectangle or anything. Do I need to unlock something? Or?
Are you on your selection tool?
Yeah, and then I click the rectangle, but nothing happens.
Erica, she might come check it out with you. You can lock it. Maybe she accidentally locked it. Yeah.
My triangle looks like a mix of several pixels. It has a lot of color on the side. So I don't know what happened. It doesn't look like that.
Is that a certain kind of stroke you picked?
I already turned off Evo.
Okay, so there's no stroke. Erica, there's another strange rectangle. Also, when in doubt, just delete it and make it again because it takes a second. That's what I always do. I'm like, I don't know, this being weird. I'm just going to start over. There, got a new square. So now that we have a square, we have a shape layer, and it's automatically created that for us. And I only want one rectangle in this. I don't want to put more things in my shape layer because I want to affect just this one rectangle and start animating it. Animation in general, is going to refer to its position on the screen, right? Where we're going to start, where we're going to finish. And those options are all under here. You have to click down all these triangles and look at your transform options. And transform is where like all the magic happens in the world. You'll just be very familiar with this. You're going to learn every shortcut for all these transform things, so you don't have to keep clicking down those triangles to get to the transform. The position is the letter P if you just want to cut to the chase. So like if you're on a layer and you just want to see the position, hit P and that'll open it up for you. And what that does is let you set a position. And you can slide around your position, X and Y coordinates with these things here. So the first one's X, the second one is Y. And let's go ahead and build just a really basic like bouncing block. Like we'll have it start down here. It's going to go in the air and come back down, and we'll just kind of loop it and just start building a very basic bouncing block. So you can use the position to get it where you want it. You can also use the selection tool and just kind of drag it down there. If you notice when I use the selection tool, it's automatically changing the position in the options there, which is fine. Excuse me. Where did it go? Okay, zoomed in. So a couple of the shortcuts I've been using a lot. Command plus and minus. I always mean to explain them when I use them, but I keep using them and forget to explain them. Command plus and minus are to make your composition window bigger or smaller. So if you want to see more or see less, or you have a very specific detail of your composition, Command plus to get in there. And then my way around, the tool way around is the hand tool. You can actually switch to the hand tool and drag around if you're zoomed in. But again, another fantastic shortcut that's going to change your life is holding down Shift. Holding down Shift will turn your mouse into a hand, so you can just go ahead and do it like that. So I can, zoom out, hold down Shift, slide it down, zoom in. Oh, I didn't quite get there. Hold down Shift and slide back down to my rectangle somewhere around here. I'm really zoomed in. There it is. So that's Command plus and minus. That's for your composition screen. And holding Shift as the selection tool turns it into a hand. Very great.
I think it's the space bar.
I'm sorry, I keep saying Shift, don't I? I'm so sorry. Driving you guys nuts. I'll edit that out. It is space, spiffed, chase. It's one of those keys down there. Okay, so just in general, put your square somewhere towards the lower part of your screen, right? Because we want to start there and we're going to bounce it. And then we're going to add our very first keyframe. Welcome to After Effects Hell is starting the keyframe life. That's what this little stopwatch is for. And click on the one next to this position, and we've built our first keyframe. Voila, perfect. Well done, good job. Yes. So I put the rectangle or the square where I wanted it towards the bottom of the screen, and now next to the word position is the stopwatch. Click on the stopwatch.
And so if you were to already have like the file or an image in there, and then you put like a rectangle on top of that image, like it'll be able, it won't animate the rest of.
No, you're going to animate everything individually.
Okay.
If you wanted it to like follow around something,
Yeah.
that's something we'll get into. It's called parenting. Is like, hey, whatever he's doing, I'm going to do too. We'll get there eventually.
So ideally in each layer you just want really one.
I like to keep my shapes separate unless they need to do the exact same thing, because your transform only can affect one layer at a time. Yeah. So we haven't played anything back because you don't have anything to play. But we have to create some animation. We need to make the box jump in the air. So we need to actually move forward in time. And this will be the first time we do this, which is kind of look at our timeline, which is on the right side at the bottom here. And you have a playhead here. You can drag this playhead around. If we had anything animating, it would show us it animating, but since we haven't done anything yet, it doesn't matter. a way to get around with the playhead is it's if you step away from After Effects for a month, you'll forget it and always have to look it up. But to go forward like one frame at a time or back, because you always are going to have to do that in After Effects, it's Command left and right. So Command left and right will actually jump one frame at a time. And you can see kind of in the time code there where you end up. So like that's our first keyframe was at 0, and I'm going to put my second keyframe at 10. And I could do that by dragging the playhead manually. I could also do the shift thing just to be very, very, very precise. So now I need, this is at the top of the jump. I need to take my square and put it at the top of the jump. And with keyframes turned on, I can do this literally just by grabbing with the selection tool. I'm going to grab the square and take them up top myself manually, and it's automatically adding a new keyframe there. That's good news and bad news, because sometimes you'll accidentally nudge your objects here or there and it'll automatically create a keyframe for you there, and you're like, no. So again, it's always about that frame by frame babysitting. At this point, we just want these two keyframes, and if you start scrubbing the playhead, you can see, we have achieved animation. And so for starters, you can take the playhead back to the beginning, and this is luckily very Premiere-like. It's just hit spacebar. Spacebar will play back your timeline.
If you drag, so if it's like Premiere, can you just drag the last keyframe and move it closer or further if you want it?
Yep, absolutely.
Wait, can you do that again with the second keyframe?
Yeah, so the key if there's no keyframe there, it will automatically add one if you move your object. Now I'm going up.
So experimenting is kind of hard because it will automatically.
Yes. You kind of have to know ahead of time where you want things to end up and how they should go. And that's more advanced, and I hope we get there by the end of the course, is there's a way to use the pen tool and draw a path and then just assign things to that path so that you don't have to experiment. You can just say, I know I exactly want that. You know, take your friend's head and put it on a roller coaster, and like, hey, I can just draw the path. I don't have to like manually do all that between work. So this is where I was getting my shift and spaces confused, and I apologize again for that. So I'm going to get rid of that keyframe, so it's still down there. When you move something around in your composition window, when you hold down Shift, that will move it exactly at only certain 90 degrees options. So if I wanted to move this directly up, directly right, directly left, directly down, holding Shift will do that, because sometimes you do want things to move in an exact straight line. Yes?
Mine doesn't do anything when I hold shift.
Yeah, mine is.
She's coming. So you select your rectangle, hold Shift, and you can pull it. See, now it's not working.
So how do you make it bigger or smaller, the rectangle?
There's a scale property. You can do that. You can also pull out these corners there like that.
Oh, so just hover over the corner and move it around?
That's one way to do it, yep.
Okay.
Shift is not working.
Maybe it's like a CS6. Do you have CS6?
Does it do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, does that too.
Okay, click it and hold down your click and then hold Shift.
So hold down, click it, hold down the click, and then hold shift.
Then hold Shift.
It's not,
Click,
it works, but
shift.
it's supposed to show the lines to show that it's moving at 90 degrees. Or it just does it.
Yeah, let me take a look real quick.
Like this way. So, but it just doesn't show that.
Oh, that's because you're not ahead in time. You're still in your first frame.
Okay.
Yeah, go forward 10 frames and then it'll show you. Okay. Hope y'all are playing around. I'm going to bring the square back down. So I'm going to go forward another 10 frames. And I'll show you another shortcut you guys want to start cramming into your brain. Remember that Command and arrows move forward a frame. Command and Shift with arrows will jump 10 frames at a time. So that's a good way to just kind of get faster through your timeline.
So you would hold down Command, Shift, and then the forward arrow?
Yeah, and then right or left. So if I know that I already want to bring that square down at 10 more frames later, I'm just going to hold Command Shift and that'll jump 10. And I can bring it back down manually, but I want it to be exactly the same as the first frame. And that's the other thing with keyframes, which is your friend, is you can copy and paste keyframes. So here's this first keyframe, and that's a certain position that I put it at in that first place. I just click on it, it turns blue, I hit copy, and then it's going to paste wherever my playhead is. And since I moved forward 10, I'm going to paste. So now I have up and down, up, down, up, down. Bam. All right, we're getting somewhere. Good. So that's one simple animation. I want to show you guys how to loop just this section of it so it can loop for you as well. If you remember when we set up our sequence, we made it 5 seconds long. So if you hit play, it's going to play that whole 5 seconds. And it can be annoying to wait and have to go back because it loops, but you have to wait that whole 5 seconds till it loops again. You want to tell After Effects to play back, but just on the section I'm working on. And that's always something you're going to be doing in After Effects because you're always working on a certain like range of frames, usually within a second, that you just want to loop to see how it feels over and over again. And playing back the entire sequence can just be annoying. So what you want to do is bring back what's called the work area. And the work area is what's looping. And that's this top bar here. So you can see at the very beginning, there's this little blue bar, work area, start. If you go to the end, work area, end. You can pull that blue back and make your work area shorter. Like for me, I just want it to be exactly my animation, so just my keyframes. And now when I put the playhead back in there and hit spacebar, it loops. It loops just what I want to loop, so I don't have to wait the whole 5 seconds.
Are you using the shortcut for your in and out?
I just dragged the top work area over. There is a shortcut for the in and out, and that's B and N. I just don't want to overwhelm you with shortcuts, but there's so many shortcuts. Is this even that? Yeah, I can pass these around now. This is a cheat sheet for a lot of the shortcuts. It's got Mac on one side, PC on the other. Who here has PCs? One? All right. I thought of you. I'll let those go around. Okay, we got that. Okay.
So I don't think I have a keyframe
Like it's not going down. How did you do it again?
The third keyframe, I copied and pasted the first keyframe there. So if you could just click on the keyframe, you can copy. And then wherever the playhead is, you can paste. And yeah, so if you get an idea of your work area that you like, B and N are your shortcuts for that. B will start your work area at a certain place, and N will be the end of that work area. So I'll do a lot of B and N when I'm typing around as well, so you get the hang of it. But one thing I want to point out here, and this is kind of an animation principle, is when things are looping and they start on the exact same frame as they end on, that loop isn't a perfect animation. If you think about it, that last frame and first frame add like a little hiccup there because it's repeating one of those frames. So technically my work area here, it looks like it's going up and down, but it's actually just got one single frame where at the bottom where it's repeating the bottom frame. So it's like up, down, up, down, up, down. It's very subtle just because it's so fast right now. But technically, if you want to do kind of this looping stuff and you want to know what a loop looks like, especially because a lot of animated GIFs and memes out there are looping things, you want to chop off the last frame because you know of your work area. You know that that last frame is actually the same as the first frame, and you don't want it to repeat itself. So now my loop, I've moved my work area one frame in so it doesn't play that last keyframe. And now it should be up and down, exactly up and down, perfectly looping.
Do you remember your frame rate for this composition?
I got 24 frames for this. Everybody got a looping square that jumps up and down? No? Yes.
Repeat how you made it, like calculate the last second.
The last part of the work area? Or the last keyframe? Which one?
Can you do from like beginning really quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is from scratch. I got a square. It's down there. Position shortcut is P. I want to add a keyframe at the front. I want to go forward 10 frames and add a keyframe higher. And then I'm going to go forward 10 keyframes again, and I'm going to copy and paste my first keyframe.
Mine just doesn't do like the line, like the blue line.
That blue line comes when you've moved forward in time. Have you moved forward in time? Because if you're adding a keyframe on the same frame the whole time,
Thank you. I was like, that
yeah.
doesn't make sense.
How do you zoom in on the timeline so you're looking at like a smaller?
That is minus or plus by themselves without command.
I see.
Yeah, so command minus and plus does the composition, just minus and plus does the timeline. And that's the key with keyframes, is you have to set them in time. So they have to come later in order for it to affect. Did I answer your question though? What did you need?
I was wondering, so like let's say for this you want to be like 1 second long, and then each part takes like half a second. But to get it to repeat, like how would you set the last? Where would you have it ending?
So you want it to bounce for 1 second. So your last keyframe would be on 1 second, right? Which is 24 for me. So my last keyframe's on 24. And that's a return to the first keyframe. This one would come on 12, right?
Yeah.
How did you add the dots in the middle?
Yeah, what about it?
So how did you add the dots in the middle?
That is automatically added when you move your rectangle. So with the stopwatch on, any movement you'd make will create a new keyframe. But yeah, so if you wanted a perfect 1 second loop, like this gentleman was saying, you just want your work area to not include that last keyframe. So like right now, that includes the keyframe. You want to pull the work area just 1 frame before so that it doesn't show the last frame, because the first frame is that frame. So that's how you get that perfect loop.
So what if you only want it to loop a few times and then you want other things to come in? Would you just have to repeat that until you, like you wouldn't loop it, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be looping. It would,
Be repetitive.
yeah, you can take all of your keyframes, so all those 3. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to go to the last keyframe because I know it's repeating, and I can paste. I can go to the last keyframe again and paste, and just keep doing that. If I had wanted to physically, you know, like actually loop in the animation, right? So that's actually just looping as well as looping the looping. Yes?
How did you get your workspace to be in like frames, not seconds? Because I think mine is in like seconds.
These over here?
Like you see how it says 0012F, 0100F. Mine are just in seconds.
Okay. That might be sequence settings.
I'm just trying to change mine so that it sounds. His is in frames.
have-
Mine are in seconds.
Yes.
Somebody know? Yeah?
The bar that's above the frame like that minimizes and maximizes the, like you can see it in in seconds or you can see it in frames. So yeah, that one. So the smaller it is, the more frames you can see.
Okay. But she sees hers in seconds. Huh.
Darken settings?
Maybe. I don't know. Google it.
I don't have this on
So I have a
Yeah, I got it.
timeline. Do you know how to get rid of that?
Did you turn off your background, perhaps?
Thank you.
On the timeline.
Like on the timeline? It's not in the background.
Is it this?
Yes.
You're all so far ahead. Stop. That's your graph editor. That's the option for that. Turn that off. Let's not touch that yet. It's just week 1, guys. We just wanted a square to bounce. That's all. If you walk out of here with a bouncing square, I'm happy. So I had made a bunch of these. I don't need them though. I'm going to go back. Another keyboard shortcut.
The line,
Yes.
you know, the vertical line, it gets drawn on the rectangle versus on the side. Does that matter?
The rectangle line will draw from the anchor point. It
Right.
depends where your anchor point is.
Okay.
So we can get into that, but we're just not ready for it yet. We just want a bouncing square. Are we bouncing squares, guys?
Yep.
All
How'd you
right.
get it to play again?
Spacebar.
Oh, space bars.
Because I want to draw your attention to the animation we're looking at is a computer mechanical instruction to go this point in the position to this point in the position and back. And the idea of a motion graphics designer designing something is just you want things to be more fluid and more human-like, because if like think of somebody walk like that, like I'm not walking 0 miles per hour and then I'm walking, then I'm 0 miles per hour, and then I'm walking 0 miles per hour. Like that's what we're doing here currently, because we just said point A, point B, and back, and it's just not natural. It's not smooth. It's just kind of jarring. It's suddenly it gets to that point and then it's going back, and that's just kind of the hallmark of somebody who knows After Effects, because they can move stuff around on the screen, but they don't quite know how to make it move well, I think would be the difference. So the first thing is just a very easy shortcut to do to all of your keyframes that is a cheat to at least set you apart from those posers, come down to your keyframes, select them all. You can also hold shift and select them in sequence. Trying to see where they hide this for real. I always just right click it. Keyframe assistant. Okay. Okay, so they put this up there under animation, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Okay? Now this is like when it first came out, it was like, suddenly everybody's an animator because they can easy ease because they used to have to do it manually. Go ahead and hit easy ease on your keyframes, and you'll see they change shape.
Can you zoom out just a second?
Yeah. So select your keyframes, animation, keyframe assistant, easy ease.
Did you have to highlight to select it, or just made the workspace area like around the keyframe?
You have to select them, yeah. So I'm just turning them blue when I select them, like that.
Oh, okay.
And for you Mac
Oh, wow.
keyboard people, somebody play it back and see the difference?
Yeah.
The shortcut for that, and again, I always know shortcuts just because I've been using it, and I'll forget it if I don't use After Effects for a month. It's F9. Does anybody know how to hit F9 on a Mac keyboard? Exactly. You have to use that FN button in the very bottom left. So FN and then F9, and it's, for me, it's the fast forward button, but it's also F9. Okay, so now I'm playing back an easy eased animation, and look at how more like bouncy and smooth it is. It's like, I'm not just like left, right, left, right. It's almost like it has a personality, right? It's easing out of the bottom, it's getting a little faster in the middle, and it eases out of the top, back down to the bottom. And that's kind of the cheap and fast way of making things animate just smoother. But the thing is, you don't want After Effects telling you how to do your job. And that's hopefully something we can adjust with us here today. And I hesitate to get into it, but I think you guys are ready because somebody already opened it, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. It's this thing called the Graph Editor. This very first option here, Graph Editor, when you click on that, you can see just a red line and a green line, and that's representing that smoothness of motion that's happened, in contrast to, I'm going to turn off my easy ease and I'll show you my graph now. Don't worry, I'll tell you in a second. So this is why it's so rigid in its animation, because it just says go from 540 to minus 119 to 540, and it's straight jagged lines, right? But if I take these and I easy ease them, function F9, it adds that little curve to it. And suddenly that's smoothing out your animation a little bit. And it's saying, hey, don't just get in a rush everywhere. Take your time coming out of somewhere. Take your time getting into somewhere. And that's kind of like part of your effects wizard mastery of this, taking this course, is that you're somebody, you're a motion graphics designer who now takes care of how things get from point A to point B, not just that they can get from point A to point B. So I'm going to zoom in here. Again, plus and minus zoom your timeline there for you. And just want to take a look at these keyboards. And you'll notice when I click on them, nothing's really happening. I'm just selecting them. And that's because After Effects Easy Ease is an automated feature. it decided what is a smooth motion for you that's desirable. I want you guys to learn and to be aware that you should take easy ease as just a starting point and always adjust it from there, because it's only guessing what you want. It might not know that, for instance, I want this box to kind of jump and hang in the air just like a little bit before it comes down. And easy ease is not doing that for me. It's just kind of smooth up and down, which is good. The smoothness is better than it was, but I need it to hang at the top a little more. And so bear with me. The graph editor is a monster aspect of After Effects that will set you apart from everybody. And I gave you the secret here today in this workshop. Count yourselves blessed. If you want to adjust the easy ease, you have to tell After Effects, hey, give me back control of my curves. And that's so many new scary words for you guys today. And all we've done is create a bouncing box.
Can you unlink like the green and the red line?
Absolutely. And I can do that for you right now because we don't need the X. Right now, it's just jumping up and down. It's not moving left and right. So we can get rid of the X. That option is in the graph editor. It's this one here. It actually just kind of looks like that. Separate dimensions. So we can separate dimensions. That's cool. It kind of blew my easy ease there a little bit though. Again, because it's automatically applying this effect for you. And if you look at your layers now, we have X position, Y position. That's what splitting your dimensions did for you there. Go ahead and click off of them and then back to the Y, because if you select both of them, they both show up, and I just want to look at the green. So I'll bring back my Y position. And now, when I click these, I have a little handle. Is that happening for people?
I don't know.
My XY thing is like grayed out, so it won't be.
I'll have Erica take a look. Your graph editor will only show you what's selected. So if you don't select anything, your graph editor is blank.
I don't see XY, I just see a comma in between the two numbers. Is that fine?
You haven't split your dimensions then. The dimension splitting is this button here at the bottom of the graph editor. Separate dimensions. You can also right click position and separate dimensions. And that'll give you X and Y.
And then what happens after that?
What happens next? All right, let's do it. So click on your Y, because I just want the Y dimension in my graph editor. Just zoom in a little bit there. And I want to mess with these handles because I want to tell the curves what to do. And I'll give you a handout in a second, but I just kind of want to show you it in practice first. These curves are changing velocity. We know that we have a 1 second bounce for our box. Yeah?
Is this calculus?
We'll see. But you won't have to do anything in your head. It's doing it for you. We know we have a 1 second bounce. We can just use that 1 second to do whatever we want. We can come out really fast on the jump and then slow down at the top and then come back fast at the bottom. You can spend that 1 second kind of rearranging the spacing of the box jump infinitely. And that's what all of these curves are doing here. And that's why they give you these handles, because I've taken control. They're no longer easy eased automatically. They are here, you have control and make it do what you want to do. And so it's a little upside down because the highest number is the 500 is actually when it's at its lowest. And then as we scrub through the timeline, we see that this number here, minus 100 whatever, is actually the highest in the box bounce. And when I click on that, it doesn't have any handles for me. And that's because it's waiting for me to tell it also to take control there. So we're going to make our own curve here, and that will change how the box bounces. Click on that high point keyframe there, that one right in the middle. And then you have to select this one here. Sorry, get out of the way. Convert selected keyframe to auto Bezier. All right, go ahead and write that down. When you click on that, basically it means give me control over this keyframe's curves. Because now I have handles for all of my keyframes. And I'll tell you what the curve's going to do in just a second, but I just want to make sure we all get to this point. Again, if you don't have handles on a keyframe, hit this button that says Convert Keyframe to Auto Bezier. It looks like a kind of a rounded corner there. And that gives you those handles to start messing with your curves. So what do these curves mean? Oh, wait. Technically, this graph editor it's definitely like advanced After Effects stuff, but if you can go ahead and grab it now, even in its very first lesson, and start applying it everywhere, like you'll stand out head and shoulders above everybody else, I promise. Because you'll know if somebody actually knows how to do After Effects because they use the graph editor. Like that's a big dividing line, is some people don't even know it exists. Some people accidentally hit it and they're like, oh, I got a graph on my timeline. Ooh, how do I get rid of it? You want it. You want to mess with that because you want to take control. Again, your responsibility is for every single frame, and the graph editor is how you take control of all of those frames. So for me, I wanted this box to jump and kind of hang in the air longer before coming back down. And I need my curve to represent that. And it just takes a bunch of practice and messing with it. But the idea with the curve is that the more diagonal it is, like a straight kind of diagonal line, is faster. Like it's going to move faster across the sky or across the jump. And the more horizontal that curve is the slower it's moving through your keyframes. So if I wanted to make a jump, I would give it, a nice ramp out of the jump, and then I want it to hang at the top. I would want the top to get flat. So I'm going to keep pulling these things out so that now I know that even though that's, again, it's upside down, the top of my jump has more time where it's not really changing its y coordinate. It's spending more time hanging around minus 100 up here. And then at the end, it's going to ramp back down to the original one, whichever it was. Now let's just play this back and see what it looks like. Right?
So it's like jumping.
So now it's more fluid and cartoonish, yeah.
Is there a way to make it so when you're adjusting the middle handles it's symmetrical?
Oftentimes, yeah, because they can get broken. I would just make it a, sorry, let me do that. Where is it? This one? Turn it off and on again. Does that do it for you? Because mine are, how do I do that? I'm holding command. It seems to be working. Like when I pull one side down, it pushes the other side up. Another part of these handles is that, again, shift works for you here. Is if you hold shift, it'll pull directly straight to the left or right. And that's definitely how you make that jump kind of hang out the top better because you have more time hanging around the hundreds. And I don't know how else to explain it. It's not calculus, really. It's just a graphical representation of, it has to go from 500 to minus 100, and how fast it gets there is going to be the speed of the jump. And so, that's what, the more this thing ramps and gets straight to 100 sooner is going to be the faster jump. And if you want it to hang out on top, you want it to hang out on the minus 100s for more frames. Because remember, this is all in time. So as the frames kind of come through that keyframe, it's still close to minus 100, still close to minus 100. And that's what's going on here. And that's why that jump kind of hangs out at the top of it. Kid jumping on a bed or whatever. How are you guys doing? Any questions? That's a huge concept. I spent $800 on a course last summer to learn it. You got it for free. So it's something that you need to find an excuse to use, because I think when you sit down in After Effects and you just want to make words go fling, 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 you have to sit down and say, yeah, I can make a word fly onto the screen, but I want it to fly on and kind of slow down and ease into it. And that's where the easy ease will get you started. And then the graph editor is thanks for getting me started, easy ease. Now I want to put my own touch on it. Because easy ease would never give you this kind of a bouncing box. It's automatically, easy ease is going ease out of that number and ease into that number. And so since it's automated, it can't decide for you creatively, I want it to hang out at top longer. Now you guys know how to do that, and that's that graph editor.
How come when yours approaches 0, it doesn't go off the screen? But I don't know, for mine, can I bring it from 500 to 0, I don't know.
It will depend on where you drew your rectangle in the first place. Yeah. And again, because that's always, those numbers are in relation to your anchor point. And that's something I didn't get into because the anchor point can get a little confusing too. My anchor point is this thing right here. And I can show you why it's going to mess me up here in just a second. Let's say I want the box here to spin as it jumps. So it's going to jump and spin as it jumps, right? Should be simple enough, right? Let's just add a rotation. Rotation is one of our options, okay? I turn off my graph editor. So I have rotation, and again, we're getting straight back into keyframes. Let's add rotation keyframe at the first frame. And I'm going to go to the very last frame and add another rotation keyframe. Manually, I can do it by just clicking on this blue thing there. But I didn't change the rotation. I want it. How much do we want it to spin when it goes up? 180 degrees. Let's just try that. And this is where the anchor point screwed me over. So when I try it, it's spinning, but it's spinning around the anchor point 180 degrees. And I want it to spin around itself 180 degrees. So you can even see it goes off screen and goes around oh. So that's a great segue into anchor point manipulation. So you need to take control of your anchor points. Every single shape you make, be aware of where the anchor point is, because all of these settings in transform are based upon the anchor point. So the X position, Y position, that's all in relation to the anchor point. The scale, the rotation, everything is hey, where's the anchor point? That's what I'm going to rotate around. This one, the terrible one? So, yeah, I just added a rotation keyframe at the front. Again, always got to hit that stopwatch. So I have a rotation keyframe there. And if I go to the end, I can add a rotation keyframe I could just type it in. That'll also do the same thing. So you have to move in time and then create a new keyframe in order for your movement to take place. But that's wrong. We don't want to do that. Let's move our anchor point and get this thing back on track. Here's another tool for you. Looks like this. It's called pan behind, but it's also got anchor point in there. Click on that, and that will let us go in and get our anchor point in the right place. Great. It's going to mess me up. It's totally screwed up because again, you should be doing your anchor point first. So there's my anchor point. And I bring it down. There's yet another keyboard shortcut that snaps things into the center for you. Once you're moving your anchor point, if you hold Command, it'll bounce it around to exact points. So I want my anchor point to be exactly in the center. It's still going to be messed up. Get that rotation off. A lot of trial and error with this thing. And that's because my anchor point, my position is now moving around my new anchor point, and that's annoying. I'm going to start from scratch because my anchor point's a nightmare, and yours probably is too. You might want to start from scratch. It's good practice. Make your square and move your anchor point right away. How about that? Here is part of the lesson with that anchor point is once you've created your square, you can see it's automatically put that anchor point in the center. And then when I hit my anchor point tool, it switches to the rectangle. And I don't want to mess with the rectangle's anchor point. I want to mess with the layer's anchor point. So you have to go and click on your layer, not the rectangle. Because the rectangle does have its own stuff it can do, which is fine. But I'm wanting to affect the whole layer. So the whole layer, there's my anchor point. Pull it to my middle of my rectangle.
Do you hold down shift to pull that anchor point to?
Once I'm moving it, you have to hit Command, and that will jump it to the center. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm cheating. I'm going to do stuff quickly. Shortcuts for adding keyframes. That can also be your best friend. Add this to your shortcut sheets there too. Once you've memorized these, does it tell you? I don't know if it does. Usually it should. You know, P will open position. S will open scale, R will open rotation, and for some reason T will open opacity. I think that's why, opacity. And then A will open anchor point. Once you learn these shortcuts, you can go around your timeline and hit Alt that letter, and that will just add a keyframe for that position or rotation or whatever. So if I go to the front and hit Alt P, it's going to create a position keyframe just where I was. If I go to the end, it's because I already have some. I go to the end, hit Alt-P again. It's going to add that keyframe for me automatically. And then I want to copy and paste my first one. Just get it bouncing again. That's not right. Me too, it's lunchtime. Okay, it's bouncing. Easy ease. Function F9. A little better. Graph editor. Pull that bad boy out. He's annoying. Sorry, I didn't separate my dimensions. Stretch out the top so he hangs out there a little longer. Now I know my rotation is going to work. Because it's based on my anchor point.
When I select rotation now, it doesn't give me like the option to put in a degree.
Are you on your rectangles rotation or the transform layers rotation? Giving me like a optical illusion. Where are you guys at? Any questions? What's going on? Yes.
So let's say you're looking at it like, oh, I want to get to the center. How would you do that?
So you just want it bouncing in the middle of the screen? Just by itself, or do you want it to actually move while it's going to, like?
Just by itself.
Just by itself. That's being the X position since I separated dimensions. X has a keyframe on because it used to have a keyframe back when it was a position. I turn off X position's time watch, and that lets me just control the X. Now it can bounce in the middle of the screen. Now, if I wanted them to bounce across the screen, I would start a keyframe here and take it off the screen. And then the keyframe at the end would be on the other side of the screen. I didn't create enough loops, so it's just going to kind of fly across the screen here. But boing, boing. Solution to that is copying and pasting actually in your timeline, so you're actually looping with animation, not just looping with playback. Just doing that for fun, just to try it. Lost my rotation, but oh, there it was. How are you guys doing? You want to move on to something else? We getting this? Where are we slipping up? This is the weird way. Well, that's an intro to those concepts. Hopefully you can take those with you. I'll pass this out now. It's just kind of another look at how you mess with curves and what those eases stuff is doing for you. And again, all of this stuff, I took anybody's interested in, I can highly, super highly recommend School of Motion, anything that they do there. They have a bunch of free stuff and trainings there. But I did what was called the Animation Boot Camp. And I don't know what they have with like student discounts and stuff, but it's like the most intense 6-week crash course in animation and After Effects that will kind of make you feel like you just went up 100 levels in a role-playing game. 'Cause it's just like every single day you have just a 2-hour session video, but the rest, whatever that 2 hours gives you, blows your mind for the next 2 weeks, except it's every single day for 6 weeks. So you kind of take the course and unpack it over the next couple of months on your own. But I can highly recommend it. That's where like a lot of this stuff to kind of just take you past that basic, like, hey, I can move a box around a screen. How can I make that more interesting and more fun? So, yeah.
Does lynda.com have After Effects?
They do. They've got plenty there too as well. You could do a whole course through Lynda, and they would get you some of the similar principles. I'm a graduate of the Animation Boot Camp, so I can at least speak highly of it there. I haven't done the Lynda ones. So from here, I want to start giving you just kind of like a little bits and pieces of like secondary animation stuff you can do. And then over the next couple sessions, we'll build a project together using all of this stuff we've been going over. We've actually done a lot more than I thought we would, considering, I guess, the complexity of that whole graph editor stuff. It can just get a little nuts. So for starters, let's start from scratch. You can start a new composition. I tend to do that. You can save that. Hang on. It's too late. I'll just show you real quick kind of how to export stuff in case you wanted to save your bouncing box. That's so dumb. Say I'm real proud of that and I want to send it to my mom. To get things out of After Effects, you'll want to export using what's called the render queue. So we can just go up to there, and this will export whatever your work area is. So that's the other reason why to pay attention to what your work area is, because your entire sequence is the whole 5 seconds, but if you only animated like 2 seconds, then go ahead and just bring your work area to those 2 seconds, and then you can export it real quick. So it's under File, Export, Add to Render Queue. And that will bring up all kinds of settings that are like too many weeds to get lost in today. In general, I take best settings, output module. There's so many here. I've gone in and created an H.264. If any of you are familiar with video, H.264 is the best compressed video for the web. In order to get there, we can go over it next week. Just to show you how to do it, I'm going to do a lossless one. And a lossless means give me the raw, highest quality version of this animated thing. And it's not going to take up too much space. Again, it's only a couple of seconds here. But lossless is the file format that Hollywood and TV commercials and everybody uses to pass around animation files because you want no compression at all. And that's what lossless is going to do for you. So that's best settings, lossless, and then output to, you can just choose your desktop. You can do bouncy purple. Hit save, and then hit render is kind of how you finish that process. Great sound. So again, that was File, Export, Add to Render Queue. And then once you're in your render queue window, you can do those settings. I sent it to my desktop, and here is my bouncy purple. It's huge. 2 seconds is 8 megabytes. And that's lossless, right? That's why animation projects are so huge. That's why Disney needs an entire, factory building full of servers, because the stuff is huge. But that's how you get stuff out of there. So the more and more proud you get of your work that we're making in here, that's just kind of a basic workflow. You can kick out your bouncing ball now if you like. But let's make some just kind of like fun little shapes that you can use to accent things. Just to kind of continue with the idea of how you can just get all these things in your tool belt, and then you can turn around and go and create some amazing stuff once you find an excuse for them. So for starters, let's draw a circle. So I got a new composition. To get the elliptical tool, you have to open that drawer, toolbox drawer, by clicking and holding. It's just like Photoshop and Illustrator. That's where you can switch your tools. So you want to use the ellipse tool. And how are we doing? 142. Fit. There we go. I'm just going to draw one circle. This is going to be like my sun. I'm holding shift so that it stays perfectly circle. And if I learned any lesson from last time, I should set my anchor point right now. And you guys should too. Okay. And now I want to draw, what's the first planet? Mercury? Is that still a planet? I've lost track. They're not calling things planets anymore. Let's draw a smaller circle to be Mercury, and I want this to be on its own layer. So by default, if you remember, if you stay with the circle tool, it's going to keep creating circles on that layer. I want to create a new layer, and in order to do that, I need to make sure I unselect my shape layer there. Because by default, that shape layer is probably selected for you. It might even be the ellipse. To click, see, I just accidentally created a circle. Use your selection tool. Again, this is why V is always pushed. Just click off of the shape. So like if I'm on the shape, just click off of the shape, and now there's no layer selected. And now I can do the circle tool, and it will create a new layer for that circle. Back to V, and now I can place this Mercury or somewhere.
Did you do that on your time?
Yep. So I had my one shape layer with this sun. I'll make it orange so it could actually be the sun. It's not confusing you guys, college students. That's my sun. I want to click off of the sun with the selection tool so that when I create a new circle, it's going to create a new layer. So I'll go back to the circle tool, and now when I create a circle, it's going to be its own layer. And you'll know that because it says shape layer 2. If you created it within the same layer, it would say ellipse 2. And you don't want it to say ellipse 2 because that's going to mean it's part of that same layer. And you can't do what we're going to do here. Back to the selection tool. Mercury is, anybody know what color it is? Blue.
Yeah, Mercury's red.
Is that why they call it Mercury? That's the joke. Mercury's silver. Anyway, I'm going to bring my anchor point there. You start getting the hang of the workflow is like create something, babysit your anchor point. Create something, make sure your anchor point's where you want it. Because those things will always come back later to bite you, and you'll be like, oh, I forgot to move the anchor point. Now everything's screwed up. So I did that one first. All right. Now I'm going to teach you about parenting. So I had mentioned this earlier today. If we want Mercury that's not silver to circle around the sun, it's a rotation, right? And it's a rotation based on the sun. Technically, it's going around the sun. Because if I tried to take this, excuse me, stop it, go back. If I tried to take Mercury and like manually animate that around the sun, it's going to be a dodgy mess and it's going to look stupid.
Oh, this is what the anchor point will help.
Exactly, because we want it to look at somebody else's anchor point and use that rotation. So I'm I'm going to do that through parenting. You can do it through moving its anchor point as well. But the thing is that you might end up moving the sun, and then your anchor point doesn't match the sun anymore, blah, blah, blah. So down here is parenting in your timeline. Does everybody say parent down here?
Yeah.
Sometimes parent goes missing. And so we have shape layer 2. I'm going to call that Mercury because I know it's Mercury. I'm going to name that sun because I know that's sun. You want to rename a layer, click on it and hit enter. Write that down, that'll save your life. Mercury and sun. So if I want Mercury to rotate around whatever the sun is doing, I'm going to parent it. And there's a couple ways to parent. So there's two things here. There's this kind of little squiggly line there, and that's what I like doing. There's also a drop down which lets you select who its daddy is. So if Mercury belongs to the sun, you can select sun, and now whatever the sun does, Mercury will do. The other option, and this is my favorite, it's called a pick whip. You can just click on that little white squiggly line, and it turns into something that lets you just drag a line to what you want to be the daddy. So there's no other option, so we're going to pick the sun. And now, whatever I do to the sun, S-U-N, will happen to Mercury, the S-O-N. So if I move the sun around left and right, Mercury's going with it. If I rotated the sun, Mercury's going with it. If I scaled the sun, Mercury is scaling with it. So that's parenting. It's such a simple idea that can actually save you so much time. Like in this instance, I wanted Mercury to rotate around the sun. Let's just add some rotation keyframes to the sun. So there's the first one, and let's go out like 10, 20, 30 frames. And then add, the rotation is always like how many times around plus the degrees. I'm just going to say 1 time and 2 time, and let's just look at that. So it's just going around once. Since my playback is looping, it's looping. No, that's cool.
So for the rotation, the first keyframe is just at 0, and then you put that at the second.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the first one could also be 0 times, and the second one could be 2 times. Then it's going to go around twice, and that's super fast. Yes?
What's it called? Could you set up keyframes while, Mercury is still the parent, and then when you want Mercury to be individual from what the sun does, you just unparent it and those keyframes remain, or no?
Mercury is still independently able to move on its own as well.
Oh, okay.
So I can go to Mercury's transform and say, what if I want it kind of like squiggling back and forth while it's also rotating around the sun? Let me just do something weird. I don't know what that is. We'll see what it does. That's too fast. Let me slow this down for a second. It's not extreme enough. So you can start just doing some funky things, because Mercury is still an independent entity that you can tell it to do things. It's just also at the mercy of the sun. So that's a weird rotation. That's like everybody would die and kind of be born again and then die. And it's, so yeah, extreme ice age and fire ages for that place. So let's go back. Last thing, I can squeeze this in here, is I want to make a moon for Mercury. Is that working? And I think you guys know how to do that. You can make a new circle, and you could parent it to Mercury, and then spin Mercury. And so that little moon will go around Mercury, but that will also be going around the sun. And so that's just kind of compounding your parents. Yes?
What if we're already parenting the sun with the Mercury, but we want to add them separately?
You want the Mercury to go to the sun. So the sun to Mercury would be backwards, right?
Oh, the thing is that right now when I'm parenting them and kind of rotate it, I figure
Okay, so it's a
when
little
you're
warbly.
rotating, the sun is shaking.
Okay.
So I wanna like go back and add the sun into a circle, like a perfect circle.
Yeah, I would just delete it real quick and draw a new circle and then parent it to the new circle. It's 2 seconds. You know how to do it. It's real fast.
I know, but like the thing is that what if you already done like tons of After Effects thing, like very complicated, and then you figure
Keyframing.
Yeah.
Don't delete it yet. Make your new circle and then copy and paste your keyframes. So you can still save your work. I'm going to make a tiny moon here. I'm making the moon silver. I don't care what you guys say. I don't know. Mercury doesn't have a moon either. So what? Okay, so I made a new tiny moon. I parented it to Mercury. And now I want Mercury to rotate. So I have to keyframe again at the front, keyframe at the end, make it go around once. And let's see what we have on our hands here. It's super fast, but it's getting a little weird. Let me turn off that position. Yes. No.
You need a third layer for the moon.
I created a third shape layer, yeah, for that moon. And so you can kind of start to get a sense of the chain reaction of things where if you wanted to create a whole galaxy, that's how you do it, you know. Maybe you do get some kind of random social media post like, hey, we want to do like the new planets out there. And maybe you're like, hey, I know how to make things spin around each other. And that's parenting for you. So I think that is as good a place as any to stop with the parenting. I know it's been an overwhelming lesson and just kind of tons of shortcuts and concepts. We'll start slowly bringing it together over the next couple weeks. I promise we're going to make some cool stuff together. But hopefully it was a nice introduction. You just start to get the hang of it. So if you have any other questions, let me know. This is my contact, my email up there. Also a good resource. My office is just down there if I happen to be around. Say hi. That's our intro to After Effects, and we're going to make you motion graphics designers yet. So thank you for coming. Have a good afternoon.